In studio, I am joined by Nasanga Aki, who is an advocate of the High Court. Thank you for making time. Joseph Simeher, Executive Director, that is at Information, and Honorable Esther Pasaris, who is the Woman Representative, Nairobi County. Thank you for making time. Now, I think I'll start with the only gentleman here, Simeher. I know you have a lot to say as far as the Huduma registration or the lack of it or should not be going on. You said one of the biggest reasons is because it would expose Kenyans in as far as their private information is concerned. What exactly are you afraid of?
Yeah, first, congratulations, because it's for the very first time that I'm in the minority on a panel here.
It should be encouraged.
It's always, I'm always an all male or the odd one woman. So congratulations. Yeah, back onto what you are asking. There are many reasons why we are advising caution with regards to the Huduma Namba registration. Government is right now in the business of almost re-registering, because they keep saying that they are amalgamating or integrating, but they are not. This is a re-registration, because you are basically going there and providing a fresh, all manner of data about yourself. And when this is put together, you have all this data about yourself, your relatives, spouse or spouses, children, it is a place of work, and many, many other things in one place without a guarantee on data protection. It means that if and when it's breached, God forbid, that all this data about you is available at once. When government defends itself, it's as if we are saying that government is will be malicious and will have bad intention. No, data breaches don't necessarily just happen because of malice and bad intention. Even involuntarily, even just by accident, it happens. Even by third parties, data breaches happen. Right now, if God forbid again someone were to breach, say your data at the National Registration Bureau, it will probably just be the information you give to get an ID. Or if they were to breach KRA, it will be maybe your ID number plus the PIN number. And so on. We have a bit of scattered information here and there. It is not necessarily wrong to integrate personal data for purposes of planning, identification and planning. But what we are arguing is that first, two very critical things. Can we have in place a regime for data protection? And secondly, can we agree, we should have had public participation, so that as a nation we agree what is important to collect and integrate, because it's not safe to keep all this data in one place. They have argued how they are not taking DNA, and perhaps they are not, but for some reason the law that enables them to do what they are doing has that provision for taking of DNA, earlobes, iris, voice waves, etc., etc. So we are saying, can we agree on what kind of data we take under protection regime? And finally, even for government itself, it's not always safe for all manner of data to be in one place, even for government. Think about security officers and intelligence officers and so on and so forth. Right now, God forbid again, you want to breach the identity of a security officer or an intelligence officer, you don't even need to look for their data. You look for their spouse data. You look for their child's data. You look for anything connected to them. And you crack and you get everything about this lady or gentleman. So even for government, it has to be very careful what kind of data you put together and what you must disperse for persons' security and integrity.
Now, just listening to you, Esther, this has happened and has been a success story in the Western countries, where you go key in a name and you get all these details, and they say this has really helped in fighting, especially insecurity in these countries. What is it that those countries have put in place that enables the system to run without putting the citizens at risk?
I was recently in Georgia, and Georgia has basically done a very, very good system to manage their properties, because they realized that women were not owning properties. They wanted to do a project for women to own properties. So they did more or less the same system. And the ICT Department of Kenya, with a few people from Lens, traveled to Georgia to look at their systems. As a country, this is where we should have started. And it's a good thing to have all the data in one place, but the Data Protection Act must be passed, and must be passed in a manner that can actually deal with all the concerns that he has, which many citizens have. But there is some data, like the properties you own. You see, this country is very corrupt, and there's been a lot of issues in terms of corruption. This data might also be able to help deal with corruption. All right, and we need to address corruption if we're going to achieve SDG number 1, no poverty. So for me, I mean, in Parliament, we have formed the Kenya Citizenships Caucus. All right, we want to address statelessness. All right, we want to make sure that people who are stateless are captured by the government, because from 1950 the British government brought a lot of people, and we've looked at this NIMS project, and we've seen that, okay, it's not capturing stateless people. All right, it's not capturing the British overseas, it's not capturing the Burundians, the Pembas, the Rwandese that are in the Shonas who are in our country. All right, so in terms of disability, it's not capturing Down syndrome, and yet we want to know, we want to have data. So this kind of data can help a country also plan. But you see, for me, I think the rush at which it went, right? Right now I'm dealing with a lot of cases where children, their parents give birth, they don't go and pick up the birth certificate, they don't, they lose, when you have a fire, you've lost everything. All right, so if your fingerprint can just go and get you all your data, right now in Nairobi, when you have all these fires, people lose everything. Then they don't even know where to start to get their documentation. They don't have their numbers, they don't have photocopies. But if the fingerprint was also one of the things that they gave, just by going with their fingerprint, they'll be able to get everything that they need printed out for them. So it has advantages, right? But it has disadvantages in that if this information gets to the wrong person. Can I give you an example of IEBC? Without the Data Protection Act, IEBC, you could actually go to IEBC and buy the list of all registered voters. All right, and that list has numbers. You could actually go to Safaricom and pay and get the list of all Safaricom numbers. There was a time that this thing was going on in our country. So we do have a problem with how we look at data as a whole. I personally have not yet registered with Huduma Namba. I wanted to get a few more feedbacks, etc. I know they've been in Parliament, but I've been extremely busy with a lot of programs in Nairobi. But the thing is, I've been addressing. We had a meeting with Matiang'i, with the Kenya Citizenship Caucus. We also met with him with civil society. Right? He welcomed us into his office, including the people that have the human rights organizations that actually have put a case in court. And we sat down and we talked. And the CS was very clear that, look, if there are concerns, come and talk to us and we address them. All right? There are concerns of security as well. We need to know Kenyans. Nyumba Kumi was a good idea. Now, whether you have, you see, the biggest problem we have in this country, we're also a polygamous country. All right? And look at NHIF. We provide NHIF, and yet we do not provide, have provisions for the second and third and fourth wife. So here you have polygamy as approved by law, but when you have an NHIF card, you have to choose one wife to be covered. So we have issues in every area of government, but the issues have to be addressed. Now, Huduma Namba went out without public participation. The law, you know, somebody can actually go to court and say there was no public participation, and this whole investment, which costs a lot of money, can be done away with because of the way we didn't follow the law. So I think there was an idea to rush it. Can we integrate it? Because if we're not going to integrate it with Lens, if we're not going to integrate it with, you know, I mean, like right now, look at my wallet. I've got my ID. I've got my driving license, my new generation. Now I think I'll have my Huduma card. Your passport somewhere? Yeah. So the thing is, in Europe, Huduma card should now be the one that give you also the license. So everything is contained in there. If you have penalties because you're a bad driver, everything can be contained. But I agree that we need to have other forms of being identified. The earlobe, the eye, the finger. You know why? Because we came across a group of citizens that work in the quarry. When they work in the quarry, their fingerprints are completely wiped out. When they want to get an ID, they cannot. They're told, go and grow your fingerprints and come back in a year. This guy will be arrested by the police, not having an ID, thrown into cells, and his life is done with. So all I'm saying is, We need Huduma Namba, fine. We need it to not be another big budget that is going to be riddled with corruption, and then you end up with another one in lands and then another one in licensing. This is ways that we're wasting public resources. Can we integrate? Can we make sure that we, Parliament, we have to, when we come back from recess, even the President in his State of the Nation address told us, pass the Data Protection Act. We need to have a bit more information from the civil society, from the, Strathmore has a good program to tell us about other countries. They've met us before and talked to us about data protection and what we need to do as Parliament. I'm welcoming them to give Parliament another a bigger audience, the information. But if 20 million Kenyans have embraced it, even without the public participation, maybe out of fear, maybe out of the desire to just conform with what government says. I think right now what we need is to ensure that it includes everyone, and then we have data protection, and we plan how we're going to spend our national resources. We have a census coming in as well. Yeah. All these could have been somehow integrated.
Now, Nasanga, I can see you burning, literally you're very restless about this. Some say, the ID number is unique enough to ensure that we identify everyone in Kenya. But as Esther is putting across, not everyone in Kenya has an ID. So first of all, that has not been taken care of. So why are we moving to get another number that most Kenyans will be locked out of? What are the legal ramifications going forward?
The ID number, rather the Huduma card, I saw the PS for Interior say that even if you have the Huduma card, you still need your ID card. You still need your passport, you still need your NTSA, your driving license and everything. But before you're registered under this Huduma Number, the NIMS regime, you need to have your registration, your registration documents, or rather your identification documents. If you do not have them, you will not be registered.
Yes.
That is the position. And unfortunately, the government is still linking the access to public services with registration of the Huduma, registration under the NIMS system. So that means that if someone is not registered, they cannot access any of the services that are provided by the government. And this ran from education to registration of property,
land,
registration of land, So the whole life of someone depends on, registration under the NIMS system. So if you do not, the government does not recognize you. Remember, they had said that it is the single source of truth recognized by the government. So if you're not there, you will not be recognized by the government. And like you rightly said, that is going to lead in compounding of citizenship problems. Esther has rightly put it that we have marginalized communities already. They do not have any form of identification. And other than the marginalized or the stateless communities, I recently saw a different vulnerable group that was put up. That is the street children. They do not necessarily have these registration documents. That means that they're going to be locked out of the system. And if the government actually intends to use this system to be able to get the accurate number of citizens for purposes of planning, then it's failing at it. And it worries me that as the days go by, we expected that at least we would have clarity on the NIMS system. But as the days go by, it becomes more confusing, it becomes murkier. One day, a government official will make a pronouncement and say that, well, people do not necessarily need the identification documents to get registered under NIMS. When these people go and try to register, they are sent away. How does it work? And I want to comment briefly on the ruling that was given by the court. And the government was told not to link access to services with the registration under the Huduma, under the NIMS system. But the government has acted in blatant disobedience of the court ruling. And they're doing it quite very, very subtly, because in one instance they are coercing people to go and register under names, and in the next minute they are sort of, you know, retracting their statement. Let me just give you an instance. You remember the Director General for the Communications Authority indicated that if someone does not register under names, then their SIM cards would be locked. That was made under on television. The pronouncement was made on television. But then I think as a way of correcting that directive by the government, the State House, I think Chief of Staff, tweeted and said that that is not the position of the government. Now, it worries me that one medium of communication is used, which is used to access very many people, is used to, you know, coerce people into registering. And another one, social media, Twitter, which is not accessible to my grandmother and my mother, is used to retract the statement. As far as my mother and my grandmother are concerned, they have to register, otherwise they will be locked out of the system. I think that is very, very malicious of the state.
Okay, Simeher, an ideal situation. You said you don't have a problem with this registration. We just need to make sure that we cater for the gaps that are in the system and, of course, ask those questions, especially when it comes to the privacy of the same. So what is the ideal situation to ensure that we all get what the government wants the Huduma number to be about, but ensuring that each and every Kenyan is a beneficiary?
The ideal situation is to have a government that is run by honest people.
Yes.
The one we have right now is not. Kenya Human Rights Commission has made coordinated a number of civil society organizations and made every effort to have dialogue with the Ministry of Interior. But the Ministry of Interior spanned this. Going to court is not just something you wake up and decide, it's fun, let's go to court. You go to court as a matter of last resort because you don't have anywhere else to go. Kenya Human Rights Commission and these other, you know, civil society organizations had made attempts to engage Parliament, made MPs in Naivasha. Surprise, surprise, some of the MPs is when they were discovering that, what do you mean? You mean Parliament has passed this act? MPs from the Parliament that has actually passed this act, and the act has been accented to by the President.
Yes.
Kenya Human Rights also and the rest of the organizations engaged with Senate. And senators, to give them credit, were alarmed and now wanted an engagement, actually wanted the suspension, temporary suspension of that registration system. And that would have been a good way out. We are not losing anything if we say, okay, you have concerns, let's put it on hold, let's talk and establish whether these concerns, one, are legitimate and they affect Kenyans and so on, adversely and so on, and let's agree together how we address these concerns. But this government, because of being run by dishonest people, spanned all this and hurriedly began to implement this system without even a policy framework. Look, you heard the other day the president say, a communication from cabinet, that they have finally approved a policy framework for data protection. Approving a policy framework for data protection when they presented in court a draft bill for data protection. Come on, where do you start? You start with the policy framework. As a nation, you agree on a policy framework. And then out of that policy, you then develop legislation. But these people, as part of their defense, they come to court and file, and the bill is just that, a proposed piece of law that can be thrown out after it has served its purpose. They've already come up with that, and then now they're saying we've passed a data protection policy. These are the reasons we are saying we see even government is not consistent. Halt for a moment. We are not dismissing this system. We are saying together as a nation, can we ensure that we get it right? One of the things being conversed in the case in court, just to mention it, is the importance of public participation. The change in law, the registration of persons, was done through a miscellaneous amendment bill and act, through which 58, I think 68 pieces of legislation were changed, out of which several, including this one on registration of persons, are very substantive changes in public policy and law. Those ones you do not change them through miscellaneous amendment. Those ones you change them on their own so that the citizens can see and be invited to participate, to give their views before Parliament then makes a decision and it becomes law. But this was put somewhere like number 25 or 28. And you have this, a list in the newspapers of 68 pieces of legislation. And it just goes like that, and it's hardly noticed. So it's not fair and it's not honest for like Minister for Interior, Cabinet Secretary for Interior Matiang'i to say that if you have issues, come, let's talk. I say on record that the ministry has been approached by Kenya Human Rights Commission and others as a coordinator of the rest of us human rights organizations to say, let's talk about this thing. We are not opposed. We are not opposed to this registration. But the manner in which it is being rushed is what we are saying, that with all these problems, that there is a problem. Whoever forces you, coerces you to go and register for your ID or driving license, you just know that you need it and you go for it.
Speaking of being rushed, there is a deadline to it, which will be May 17th. And
no, that would be legal.
That is the thing.
The court
According to the government, they say, and I believe CS Matiang'i sat with my colleague Dennis Okaria and said there will be no extension to this. Yet you went to court and the three-judge bench said that Kenyans do not have to participate in the NIMS rollout, and it can go on even as a case is being heard. Now, Pasaris, this shows a lot of discrepancy between...
my brother here said so many things, and I need to correct a few of them. Parliament has over 349 members. You can meet 10% of Parliament, and they probably didn't know what was going on, but the majority of parliamentarians would have known that there was that particular bill. Right, so it's if you pick 5 or 6 people and invite them for a seminar and they don't know, it's not a reflection of the entire Parliament. So because we're many, all right. Now miscellaneous provisions. I think the House leader sometimes look at what is government's plan and what laws needs to be changed, and he puts them in. It's a bit naughty sometimes because you need to take some of these substantive matters and have them strictly as passed as a complete law, and then do the public participation. May 17th, I think that is wrong, because you will have people maybe after May 17 children turning 5. So when you say you're going to stop it, you can't. Registration should be a continuous process, all right? Because we're always changing. I mean, data is always going to be enhanced and improved. So we can't do that. As for Matiang'i, I mean, not to defend him, when we took the Kenya Citizenship Caucus, we also took UNHCR, and we also took a few representatives of the human rights. And, he knew that there was a court matter. And he actually said, I mean, because we have a court matter, I really shouldn't have you in my office, but I'm not going to let you leave. I'm going to hear you all out, because Kenya is for all of us, and we all have to be on the table to discuss some of the issues that are pertaining to you. So he had them there, and I could actually arrange for another meeting, because I really believe that as Kenyans, you mentioned something like we have dishonest leaders. I think we do have a few good leaders, and we do have a few good civil servants. We do have a problem with our structures. I mean, with the structures and some of the systems we've put. Like for me, IFMIS, I don't know if IFMIS did everything that it did to Kiambu County. I mean, surely we have to think about what are we going to do with IFMIS, because that's a conduit of money going out, very easily. Huduma Namba, the issues of Kenya human rights. I honestly urge you, and I can be a mediator here, that you sit down with Matiang'i. Let's try and have another attempt. Leave the court matter in court, but sit down and we iron this, because at the end of the day, Kenya is bigger than all of us. It's not a show of might, but I love civil society, and I really hope that it grows, because civil society keeps government on its toes. It's the reason why things happen. How many people celebrate Omtata? Because he goes and he fights for issues. Civil society is good. Look at when we had the red vests. Right? It was civil society that managed to get the lady Betty out. So I'm saying that this country needs everyone. Elected leaders are not the voice of the country. It is the people. Social media puts everyone on their toes. right? But then I agree also that her grandmother is not on social media. When you make statements like, you know, you have to do this, or you... the president good advice, because even for me as the county woman rep, I have 17 committee members. If they don't advise me well about what is going on the ground, I will fail, because I can't be everywhere. So I honestly feel that they're good citizens in Kenya. We want progressive work, and I agree, you know, what she said, that, you know, you will need an ID. Why? Because you know, these are checks and balances. If you register a child at 5, by 18, by the year when they're supposed to be 18, if you registered 2 million people here, then by a certain number of years, you need to end up in 13 years, you need to end up with the 2 million people getting IDs. Then you'll realize that Kenyans are not getting IDs. Look at how many Kenyans have not collected their IDs. You know that there was a scam to make sure that there were more IDs than the citizens, to ensure voting went in a certain manner. I think if Huduma Namba is intended to do what it's supposed to do, right? And it hears the voice of every Kenyan. It engages with civil society, who actually looks at every iron dots and whatever, you know, right? So I honestly believe that let's all understand that this country belongs to every citizen. Even that street child has a right. Okay, how are you going to facilitate when a child comes and has no birth certificate, has no ID, right? They've lost it. Have a call center. I'm going to actually put up a call center, because our government doesn't have a call center where you can call and talk as a citizen and hear. That's another way to have public participation. So there are lots of good ideas on how we can improve our government. Remember, this government is for the people and by the people. So people out there, remember, your leaders are there because you put them there.
Okay, let's talk about the involvement of chiefs in doing this. Some say bad idea, others say these are the people that know the people in the grassroots. Your thoughts, Ms. Anger?
Now, I think the first question would be, are the chiefs capacitated to undertake the role that they have been assigned? Because they are the coordinators of the whole registration system on the ground. As the coordinators, at least they have to have basic knowledge of how the kits run, how data is input, how the data can be protected before it gets to its final destination. Because unfortunately, unlike the registration during the election period, this data is not transmitted real time. So it has to be stored somewhere in the custody of the chiefs, because they are the coordinators anyway, until now it is transmitted to its final destination. Do they have all that capacity? If they do, well, it will be an added advantage, because they also have knowledge, apparently, of the people in their area of jurisdiction. If they do not have the capacity and know the people in the area of jurisdiction, then that's a loss, because it is sensitive data that is being collected. If the coordinator, the chief coordinator, does not have the know-how of how it will be protected, I think at the onset, the integrity of the data would be lost. And I think it is very important at this point to distinguish between data security and data protection. Yeah. When we talk about data security, we are basically talking about the software, the hardware, and you know, the design of the system used to collect the data. We are talking about those KIMS kits. And unfortunately, as designed, the KIMS kits have USB ports. So someone can actually just insert a flash disk and collect the data that has already been collected by the clerks. What security measures have been put in place? So when we talk about data security, also we are talking about hacking of systems. I know the government has been very clear that they have a very strong system that is not susceptible to hacking, which I really don't believe, because from my interaction with IT gurus, they say that every system is susceptible to hacking. Now, when we talk about data protection, we are talking about the handling of the data, the integrity of the data, the confidentiality that is guaranteed during collection of the data. How is the data collected? How is it stored? Who can access it? For what purpose is it being collected? How will it finally be disposed? Upon use, is someone going to be notified? That is it when we are talking about data protection. I'm just wondering, because the whole system, the whole process of registration has been very rushed. If we can just take a step back, November 2018, we have Parliament passing it. December 2018, the President is assenting to it. It's operationalized in January. In February, we already are doing a pilot. In March, almost a month after the pilot, we already, or rather it was in April, we already rolling it out. So you even wonder, between the pilot and the rolling out of the whole process, did people take a step back to analyze what was the findings from the pilot process? Was it sufficient time to train these data clerks and the chiefs who are the coordinators at the lowest level? I'm sure all those questions I have raised will give a negative answer, and it will answer your question as to whether the chiefs are best placed to be the coordinators on the ground.
Okay, Semeha, just listening to her, that timeline definitely brings a lot of questions to mind. What do you think, and what do you think is a reason behind the rushing of the process? Because we can't query if the chiefs are actually the right people to do this. But then again, why do we have a deadline to this?
Absolutely. There are many things happen in this country. A lot of the time you get public policy being implemented deliberately to favor private gain, private interests. Procurement-driven public policy implementation. That by the time a decision is being made, someone has already, already made a decision. If it's importing kits, they're already in the high seas on their way or in the air somewhere and so on. The decision is made today, and tomorrow these things are available, and they know who's going to supply and who's going to gain from it. So partially it's that thing of using public office and public policy to benefit private interests, private business gain. That is part of the problem. They talk about amalgamating data. I just want to illustrate as an example, integrating data rather. That as the PS kept arguing on radio and so on, he had a lot of time, and that was good to appear on radio and say that we're just integrating data that the government already has. So then why do you call us physically to again come to you and present all these documents? It would have cost the government much less, some IT gurus have told us about, at most $1 billion shillings, to integrate what it already has using IT systems. And then later carry out a public campaign for citizens to understand what this is all about. And then invite citizens to go and validate, verify, validate the information, and where there are gaps, now provide additional information. By that time, of course, I'm presuming that we would have used the ideal approach, which is, we have data protection mechanisms in place, and we have involved the public. We have done public participation, and people understand. But when you push public policy and rush it, and you do not want citizens to understand, more often than not, it's because you want it to benefit private interests. That there are things you've lined up, so you do not want to give space for anybody to question. You even get angry, like going to court. Going to court is not necessarily wrong. It's not antagonistic. You're not against the government. You're just saying that since we cannot agree, can we ask another arm of government, same government, to intervene for both of us? But the venom we got from the executive, it's like we were called the terrorists, the civil society that is joining hands with terrorists, So it is because people are feeling pricked. How dare we question their schemes? We are not questioning this just on behalf of ourselves, those of us who lead civil society organizations or who work in civil society. It's for public benefit. These civil society organizations are actually public organizations, not private organizations. So we question, go to court for public benefit so that this can openly be looked at by another arm of government that has that responsibility.
Now, Esther, definitely the three-judge bench said, let's go ahead with the registration, but within certain parameters. But even as we talk about it here, there are many other Kenyans who do not know what that meant and even what their rights are, because as you rightly said, right now they're going and still being sent back because they do not have certain material. Yet one of the tenets that was actually says that personal information should not be shared with other national, or rather, no public services should be denied to citizens for not having any of these documents, and you can give the information you want, and what you don't want, you can stay with. Esther, how now do you go back to the citizenry and educate them on what their rights are and, you know, stop them from feeling like they are being disobedient to their government? Okay,
we talked about the chiefs. I think the chiefs need to be empowered, all right, and they have to be involved because they're at the grassroots level. I think we should have also had some civic education for parliamentarians, county assembly, so that they could also be able to talk. It was really fast-tracked, and you know, Kenya works with tenderpreneurs, so it was fast-tracked, and it raises a lot of questions. But I also admire the efficiency at which it went through. You know, so sometimes the government is so slow, we complain. When it's fast, we're complaining. But I feel that we can resolve some of the issues that we have around the Huduma Namba. When it comes to IDs and passports, I remember when I was young, in my 20s, early 20s, I used to go in and out of London with my passport without a problem. All right, and everybody loved the Kenyan passport. It was like everybody accepted it. But today, it's like we are under so much scrutiny because we have actually had so much corruption in the issuance of passports. We've had so much corruption in the issuance of birth certificates, in the issuance of IDs. And maybe some of this is because stateless people in our country are also having a hard time. But we also have terrorists. All right, and we need to protect the citizens. And there's some information that maybe we're not privy to, which informs governments, you know, intention to do something. Maybe this is a way also to ensure that all those passports and IDs that are illegal can be taken out of, you know, and the people can be taken out. So I feel that there's a lot of good, but I'm not going to register with Huduma Namba. I'm going to stand with the people that cannot register by the deadline, because I feel, as the Kenya Citizenship Caucus, we want to make sure that everything that is done in this country that impacts and affects the citizens is done with the protection of the citizens' rights. All right? So I feel that there should not be a deadline. There should be an open ear to listen to the concerns. All right? Because we want to perfect it. The civil society should be embraced because this country is where it is. We have a new constitution because of civil society. We have a lot of good laws in this country because of civil society. They have tired and burned the midnight oil to even educate Parliament on so many areas. Every bill that we pass, you will see a civil society arm behind it. All right, and the citizens, social media, we should also have you know, rallies. You know, we go for rallies for the wrong reasons. Forget this Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm so busy trying to work and serve the people. I don't have time for this tanga and kieleweka. I feel, can we start talking issues? Can parliamentarians be told, the MCAs be told, let's educate, let's do civic education with the people. You know, like even NHIF, universal health, we cannot achieve it without this, you know, most people don't even understand it yet. What are their programs? Why do Teacher Service Commission have such a good deal and the others don't have it? What informs their deal? You know, I mean, NHIF, even if I'm in the health committee, I am totally frustrated. You know, and I want to tell the arms that are dealing with corruption, please be vigilant, all right? I mean, these Friday arrests are good and spending weekends on cells, it's drama and everything. For me, I just feel that we should really honestly address the big corruption, the billions that are being lost. So Kenyans can have confidence that that arm of government is working and it's working well. And for me, I think Huduma Namba has a lot of good. all right? But the data protection, the security of that data, all these issues, the issues that, you know, I mean, we took a team of Down syndrome with us for our meeting, and they said, you know what, we want to know how many Down syndromes are, so it can inform the government, integrate it with the census somehow, and, you know, we could have done it all together. We have a budget for census, we have a budget for Huduma Namba. This government, honestly, has a lot of money to waste. We could have integrated even with Lens and done one thing. What was the urgency? People are questioning, but I also like the efficiency, because I think government needs to be efficient. So it's a catch-22 story. It's a catch-22 story, but yeah, I mean, yeah, sometimes the efficiency can bring deficiency. I don't know. I mean, you know, inclusive and exclusive are the same thing. I honestly feel every Kenyan, this is our country. And sometimes, you know, as you said, when we go to court, we don't go to court because we want to fight. We don't want to antagonize. We don't want you to see us as the enemy. We go to court because that's what our constitution gives us, so that we can improve and better our country. And when we go for mandamanos, yeah, but police, wacha kutia gas watu, honestly, and arresting people. When people want to demonstrate, it's because the government needs to listen. And when they demonstrate, if the government doesn't listen, then we're going to end up like countries like Northern Sudan, isn't it? I mean, we have to, we and Venezuela, I mean, we have to listen to the voice of the people. And the voice of the people is the power of this country.
Now, Simehe, speaking of being a public entity and not a private entity, I'm sure you've heard that you have been pointed at as also being on someone else's payroll.
Yes.
As a human rights activist.
Yes.
So this is also your time to eat in
Yes.
your own way. And it says this is why probably you are being referred to as terrorists, literally working against what the government is trying to achieve here. But again, you're saying you're not antagonizing, you're not against this, you just want some of the questions to be answered and people to pay attention to the gaps in the system. So where do we go from here? Because May 17th is drawing nigh.
You know, government gets terrified by the work that we do as civil society, particularly governance, human rights organizations, because they expose the ills in government. That is why they get terrified. You know, otherwise this tag that they put on civil society that it's you know, serving some master's you know, agenda somewhere because of receiving foreign funding. The biggest recipient of foreign funding in this country is government. It's not civil society. By huge margins, it's government. Yeah. And they receive it and steal it, you know. Absolutely, they receive it and steal it. Civil society, there you do that. And yes, there are people who make mistakes in civil society, like in misappropriation of funding, immediate action is taken to court, and so on and so forth. So that, using that as a basis to say that civil society is serving the foreign masters is just ridiculous. What terrifies government is the link between civil society and public accountability, civil society and integrity, civil society and fighting impunity and fighting corruption. Now that terrifies people in government because they want to hold on to power without accountability. We are saying, you are in power, hold on to that power for the service of citizens, as Honorable Pasari says, for the good of all of us, and allow, as the Constitution allows us, allow us to mulika you, because that's our duty. By the way, it's the role of every citizen to actually doubt government. Don't always believe government. It's good for government when we don't believe them. At first instance, that we must doubt what you are saying, we push you so that you can explain to us what you are saying, so that you can secure buy-in, so that we can better what you are saying. You do not have the monopoly of good ideas. They come from all these citizens, hence the principle of public participation. The way forward is that, of course, there's a case in court, it's going on. We will leave that to the court of law to decide. But again, as early as Honorable Pasari said, we hope that the respondents, being government agencies, particularly Interior and ICT and Parliament, can maybe some kind of Holy Spirit can persuade them that these people are raising these concerns on behalf of millions of Kenyans and not for their own personal benefit. And they can say, can we, both parties, can we ask the court, hold on, let's talk. Just hold that case for a moment. Let's sit aside and talk. What are the issues? And then we have dialogue. As people who belong to the same nation, want to make it better, all of us have an interest in our security, in our planning, in our registration, in our identity, and so on. And let's have a discussion as Kenyans. And then we can go to court and say, thank you very much, we have agreed.
Yes.
Okay, now before you chime in, just as we were speaking earlier, you can hear the confusion and people wondering, who should I believe? But then again, fear seems to be quite a big incentive here, Nasanga.
Yes. From what you've seen on the streets, that's clear proof that there was never public participation. And if it was there, it was done very cosmetically, because there's so much confusion. You had one of the people saying that after registering under the Huduma number, you get a Huduma card, which will be the only card that you will require for accessing all the public services. But that is not the position. According to the PS for planning, he said that you will still need your ID card, you will still need your NHIF card, and all the cards you have in your wallet, which you feel are very bulky.
So it's an additional card. It's
an additional card, and you question what's the value addition. And indeed, there has been so much coercion by the government, as I mentioned earlier, subtly, although, because at the onset we saw, was it Machakos County government, there was a statement issued by the county government of Machakos instructing all its employees to go and register, otherwise they will not get their salary for April. Was it April? So definitely they would be forced to run and register. I had mentioned the threat by the Director General of the Communication Authority. Your SIM cards will be locked if you do not register. And that is coupled also by the threat by the immigration peers, saying that you cannot get your passport unless you register under the name system. And also the CS has mentioned that the Huduma number is the key to accessing all public services. So everyone is rushing to register, not because they know the purpose of the Huduma card or the registration under names, but because they're scared what is going to happen to me. And unfortunately, the government is still not communicating clearly what the purpose for the Huduma number is. Yes, they say it's planning, but other than that, they are silent about any further thing.
Simeha, we're normally going, let me interrupt you for a moment there. When we're going into elections, we have all these public campaigns to ensure that you register, know your polling station, know this and know this. And this goes on for a long time, and a lot of investment goes into it. And as we mentioned earlier, this seems not to have been done. So going forward, if the two parties can sit down and talk about it, how would you want to see that process go forward?
And that's precisely one of our concerns, that citizens are not well informed about this. We want to encourage government, come on, let's not appear like we are competing or fighting to see who wins, who has the most propaganda, and therefore they become the winner by shouting that we've registered 5 million, 8 million, 10 million, 15, 20 million. And so, no, come on, let us reason. We are saying let's deal with each other by the force of reason, force of intelligence, force of information, and say, let's put this on hold. We are not saying this is necessarily a bad thing. We put it on hold, and the first thing is to agree what do we want to achieve with it as a nation. Because that is what determines then what kind of information you look for. After we've agreed what we want to achieve with it, what kind of data that must be collected or integrated, we say, how do we roll it out? Do we necessarily have to do what you are doing by asking people to come and give you this information? Or do you in fact start by integrating what you have, and then later we validate? But even before we go there, then we say, let's carry out a public information, public education process for people to thoroughly understand what this is all about, so that all of us support it. Otherwise, for now, as Mheshimiwa said, even I am not boarding. And I've persuaded my family not to board, and given reasons why we will not board for now until these things are cleared. And then after that, can we put in place mechanisms, particularly for data protection? After we've agreed what kind of data and for what purpose, we put in place mechanisms for data protection. And only after that, then can we say, let's roll out this system, cut out any coercion. What is this coercion for? And threats, what are they for? Cut it out. So registration is continuous, and you know that it's each citizen. Should they fail to go and register, as I said earlier, if I didn't have an ID, I would feel it. I would feel the consequences of not having an ID. I wouldn't need anybody to threaten me. and tell me that you will not get this and that. When our children get of age 18, even before they totally turn 18, we as parents are already thinking, how do we help them to get a national ID? Because we know why they should get a national ID. Nobody threatens that unless your child has this, they will not get that. Cut out the threats. Let us be civil about how we go about this, a public policy, an important public policy that is for all, not for those that agree with the government and only, and then the rest are left out, not at all. And again, one more thing as to emphasize what Mheshimiwa said, the people who don't have any registration documents, she's mentioned many, but let me add Nubians, for example, the Nubian community, who are party to this court case. Can we deal with that challenge, first of all? Because if we proceed the way we are proceeding, they get left out. Because they are not in any system, the identification and registration system. Can we as a nation deal with that, ensure we accommodate everybody who deserves to be accommodated, then we move to the next step, you know, where we want to move the nation in terms of registration and identification.
Okay, so Esther, in this case, you've said you've been in contact with the Ministry of Interior. Now, when it comes to the minority, the stateless, and even the ones with disability and different conditions that have not been captured, what is the way forward? How is this going to be done to ensure they are also part and parcel of this?
I believe C.S. Matiang'i has realized that he has to work with everyone. And when we went to his office, yes, he has. And I you know, I want you to be open to having dialogue. And I love the fact that you said the court case can be there, but we can, you know, when a court case is costly and it's time consuming and it shows that, you know, you're having friction, you can actually sit down and negotiate and withdraw the case and you work together. And I think that is something that I'm proposing. I shall arrange for the civil society again, especially the ones behind the court case, to meet with the CS. I did take a Nubian representative with me for the meeting. As I said, Kenya Citizenship Caucus is a caucus of about 20 members of parliament who are concerned about statelessness, but they're also concerned about making sure the Huduma Namba is actually going to serve Kenyans and serve the purpose and the data protection. So we want to engage with the wider public, and that's why I'm not rushing to register, because I want to make sure that all my Nairobian citizens understand it and are on board. And the challenges of not having a birth certificate, not having an ID card are not going to impede them, all right? And then I'm going there and registering and getting on. No, I'm going to wait. I'll be the last person in Nairobi to register because I want all my constituents to understand it. And that is the duty of the Interior Minister. The Nubians, I think by August, we will have the Nubians added in as one of the tribes of Kenya. The CS has promised us that they're fast-tracking that and they're working on it. Because the Nubians were worried. They thought they would be the 43rd tribe. And then the Makondes were added in. We have the Pembas, we have the Shonas, we have the Burundians. These are Kenyans that, these are citizens, sorry. These are citizens, and they're Kenyans as well. Yeah. They're citizens that were brought by the British and the British overseas to work in Kenya. Yeah. And then their families grew up here, stayed here, and lived here. Of course, we've got a few that have come in and tried to also mix in and, you know, blend in. So we need to find a way of vetting, and there's a vetting process that's in place. Every community, we're working with the ministry, with the ministry to ensure that every community that we know and we have the papers, because we have some that their parents have been here and they went to school, but they went to school with ID cards that were fake. Now, when we looked at the comments from the streets, I would like to see all the cards that I have in my wallet also go. I would like Huduma Namba to incorporate the NHIF, to incorporate the ID. When you get 18, you just go and you put it in. When you buy a property, you go, you put it in. I mean, why can't we just have that one card? And I'll tell you why Huduma Namba is a success. The government was very strategic. They had Huduma centers, all right? And Huduma centers have really helped the youth, have really helped women, you know? So calling this the Huduma Namba, I think it kind of, everybody goes to the Huduma centers anyway. Yeah. So I have a feeling that that was good strategic planning on their part. But please, as I said, this country belongs to every citizen, and it has to be inclusive, not exclusive. So we have to hear the voice of everyone. We talked about the donor funding. Government is the biggest beneficiary of donor funding. Civil society gets money from the same donors because these are checks and balances that the donors want. So let us work together. Let us unite. Let us ensure that we serve all Kenyans, because ultimately, if we don't deal with Kenyans and the poverty and the system breakdowns and the suspicions and the corruption and the continuous talk, we're going to end up with a problem. So even the president should be accessible to Kenyans when they want to discuss issues. Like, I mean, I'm a woman rep. I have 100 million shillings to serve the whole of Nairobi. It's not enough. 6 million shillings per constituency, 100,000 shillings. The men in parliament are never going to give the money. So can the government talk to donors and say to the donors, can we give some money to the women reps so that they can actually serve the people? Because sometimes I do projects and people find that it's not sufficient. So all I'm saying is there has to be continuous dialogue and alternative routes to address the issues. It's not a straight line. Okay, there are many, many lines and corners that we will take, but ultimately we'll get to our destination.
Okay, now Nasanga, even as we close, they say knowledgeable people are an empowered people. So going forward, what would you like to see done? And especially for those that are not getting the services they need or have been threatened not to get the services they need if they don't go by the government's directive, what's the recourse?
They say that if a child does not crawl before they walk, at some point they will have to crawl. I feel like the whole of this process has been done in such a rushed manner and very unprocedural, and it's going to get to a point that the government will be forced to backtrack its steps and get things done properly. And I'm happy Simeha mentioned the issue of dialogue. When the court decision was given, I feel like the government should not have taken it as a winner takes it all. It should have been a point of retrospection by the government. Yes, the court has said that you can proceed and, with the registration. At that point, I think the government should have called the civil society organizations which are raising concerns to have dialogue at that point, because having looked at their petitions, I feel like all their asks can be granted by the government. It is just a matter of sitting down, compromising, and things will get done properly. And just for the benefit of the citizens, the decision the ruling by the court stated that it's a voluntary process. You can go there and decide to give information that you want. You can decide also not to go there. You will not be penalized. You should not be penalized at all. You should not be denied public services. I'm dissuading myself from saying government services because they are public services. You should not be denied that. Unfortunately, a deadline has been put by the government despite the court's direction that there should be no deadline. Past the deadline, I think if someone still wants to register, they are at liberty to go and register. And if they are denied registration, then they will have a very ripe case for contempt of court. Because as it is, the government is really, blatantly disobeying court orders. But we are waiting, or rather, I think the civil society organizations are waiting for the right time to institute a contempt of court. Contempt of court orders application. But I hope it doesn't get to that, because what is clear from Simeha and Honorable Passaris is that we don't want to fight with the government. We are all acting for the interest of the public. Yeah? So I hope the government can decide to have a dialogue with the people who appear to be raising concerns.
All right, our learned lady in the panel should end the discussion, or yes. Simeha, you still have something burning?
On this thing of deadline, yes. Please, let everybody know that there's no deadline. Yes. Because once a court of law has made a decision, it doesn't matter what anybody else says. Those who are saying there's a deadline, that's null and void. And that's the civil and fair thing to say, that there's no deadline, this process is not compulsory, that there should be no coercion, that nobody should deny you. And I like what she's saying, these are public services which we fund. In fact, this is an administrative process that cannot override constitutional guarantees for benefits from public services. So those who are saying these things, just treat them as if they didn't exist. After all, these guys say a lot of things that don't make sense. So let's treat them as if they don't exist and just go by the guidance of the court of law, but then hope that that spirit can come upon them, and Esther here has promised that she may persuade some of them to listen to the applicants and interested parties to sit together as Kenyans in good faith with an open heart and talk about these things and agree.
Okay, Nasanga Aki, Advocate of the High Court, thank you for your time. Of course, Justice Simehe, Executive Director, Information, and Honorable Esther Pasaris, Nairobi County Women Rep. Thank you for your time, even as we delved into this very controversial conversation, Huduma Namba registration. It is still ongoing, but as it has been said, that ruling on the 1st of April, it's not mandatory, and there are many other parameters that registration is still ongoing. Well, the conversation continues, but thank you for joining us on NTV Today. My name is Gladys Gashanja. Stay with NTV.